ahead and thank you, everyone. Again,
Mhm,
welcome to NEC's Talent Search APR, Unpacking the Talent Search APR. I want to welcome,
mhm,
thank you all for joining. We are recording this, and I also will be answering questions in the Q&A. So please put all your questions in the Q&A.
mhm,
We'll keep things in the chat. My name's Lisa Retta.
mhm,
I don't want to take a lot of time. I know Donna and Leah are with us as well with NEC, and they're going to launch, Donna's going to launch a poll. We're trying to find out how many y'all are doing this for the first time.
mhm,
Lourdes, I'll let you know, but I wanted to turn
mhm,
to my dear friend Lourdes, Maria Lourdes de Zavala, and she will be taking us through the
mhm,
for talent search and unpacking it. Thank you, Lourdes, for joining.
mhm. Okay, and I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. What I do have instead for you is I'm showing currently the Word document rather than a PDF or anything.
Okay,
Um,
they have the
so
PDF.
yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, yeah. So right now I have it in the Word document. And go ahead and um,
And everyone out there, you
yeah.
should, it's in the Google
Mhm,
Drive. And in fact, I don't know if the document might be too big for me to put in the chat, but
mhm,
Donna's putting the link to the Google Drive in there so you can see that.
mhm,
We also have a poll going on to find out if it's your
mhm,
PR. And Lourdes so far, 68%,
mhm,
68%
mhm,
say it's their first time.
mhm.
And
Okay, great, great. Mhm,
Nosy, about 60% are using Bloomin. Okay.
mhm. Okay.
And be the top one. Then student access is next, and then Lakai, and some people doing Excel. Some people are doing other. So just
Mhm,
letting you know. So we have a lot of 73% now are doing it for the first time. So just letting
mhm,
you just whenever you're ready to go.
Okay, great, great. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you so much to all my friends and colleagues that I'm seeing you on signed on and welcome. I'm so excited to be joining my friend Miss Lisa Retamoso and the Nosotros Education Center and Donna and Leah, who are just fabulous. And I'm just so happy to be joining you all. I've been doing talent search for a really long time, and I'm thinking back in 1989. 1990, somewhere around there, was when I first submitted my first talent search annual performance report, and I've been doing it since then. So, a lot of years. I've been in TRIO for 39 years, and I'm excited to have always opportunity to work with my colleagues to help get them ready for the APR and talk about anything data, anything numbers. Is really what my passion is. But mostly because it's us really telling the Department of Education our successes and the stories about our students. And so I'm really excited to be able to help you all as you all get ready, especially for those of you who, Lisa mentioned, this is your first time that you're submitting the annual performance report amidst all of this chaos. So I hope we can alleviate a little bit of that and help you get ready for this year's APR submission. So let's have a conversation about the Talent Search Annual Performance Report. Well, for many of us know that there's a government shutdown, right? And so we're going off of like what we're hearing. What we know to be true is that we are all required to submit this annual performance report. That there is a web portal that we use at trio.ed.gov that is where we need to be signed into when it does come time to submit the annual performance report. But we also know that there are different constraints that are going to be happening. And so those are some of the things that I really want to hit about as we're talking about this Talent Search 24-25 annual performance report. Currently, if you go out to the Department of Education's homepage, you'll see that it says we're in a government shutdown and that this website is not being updated. And so that means that any data regarding the APR is frozen. We don't have any communication with our program specialist. And so it's challenging times with respect to that. But what we also know is that the Department of Education works with a contractor, and the contractor is the one that usually puts the APR website, the portal, together. And so, for many of us who, if this is, a continuing APR and the director's the same, the certifying official is the same, then if the APR web portal does go live on October 29th, as they're indicating, we will not experience, hopefully, any, constraints with trying to get our APR submitted. However, if you are a new director, if you have a new certifying official, then it's going to be very important for you to try to log on once we hear the APR website goes live, because you'll want to make sure that you log in and that you have those permissions that are set. If you do not have those permissions and we continue on with this government shutdown, and any lack of communication that you may have with your program specialist, then it may be difficult for you to submit your APR. So hopefully, the contractors of the APR web portal, are trying to figure out like what's going to happen. And or as Lisa said, if they decide, what, we're going to delay the opening of this APR portal, then we're going to have to just kind of move along with it. However, we do know that we need to get our APR in, so we're going to spend our time and do our due diligence with capturing the information that we need to getting this APR submitted. Okay, so most of that detail is already available, so let's focus on that. And then that way, when the APR website does go live, we're ready. We're using our data systems, whether it's Blumen or Student Access or Lakai or some other system that you're using, that you're able to readily be able to submit your APR in that timely fashion, because we do not want to delay and wait till the very end to get that APR submitted. Because if we don't submit the APR by the time the web portal opens and or closes, then we are no longer in compliance. The APR portal is shut down and you can't submit your APR. So don't do that. Get ready and be ready. So once we hear that everything is back to fully functioning. Okay, so again, some things that are really important about this APR for 24-25 is that this is a prior experience points year. So we need to get those points. They're going to be critical to us in the refunding of our grants in that continuity. So get your APRs in, work on getting the data that you need so that you can earn the maximum prior experience points that you're allowed. Log into the trio.edu.gov website. We're hearing that on that site, if you log in now, it's indicating that the Talent Search APR is going to open on October 29th. So in just a few short days, a week, and that it will close December 4th. Again, do not wait until it's too late to log in, to certify who your certifying official is, and to ask for any permissions, especially if you're a new director and or this is the first time that you're submitting. You will also want to log in so that you can download the Excel file that identifies those students that you're going to be reporting the outcomes for with respect to degree attainment. We're going to be downloading the cohort 2018. This was the group of students that you identified in the 2018, 18-19 annual performance report that said these students enrolled in college, and these are the individuals that I will track. They would identified as the 2018 cohort. For most of us, they would have been graduating in 2019 and enrolling in college by the fall of 2019 or a deferred enrollment in the spring of 20. So again, this is the group that you want to download that Excel file for, just again, so that you can confirm who you are tracking. As I mentioned, it's going to be super, super important for you all to identify your certifying official. And this government shutdown, the impact that it could potentially have on us, and particularly if you are new, is that the Department of Education, again, contracts the contractor, right, who manages this web template and format that you all use to submit your APR. And if somebody uses that, the portal to request for permissions, what typically happened is that the contractor forwards that request onto the Department of Education, and most specifically your program officer, to request for permission for the director or the certifying official to be identified as individuals who can submit the annual performance report. Without that communication between the contractor and the Department of Education, that's going to make things more difficult and challenging for someone who's new to submit their annual performance report. And what I mean by new is new to that data system that the contractor uses to identify these are the individuals who have permission. So you could experience, a lag in getting the approval to submit your APR. In the student support services, I worked with a couple of individuals who waited, till like the latter part of the month to submit the APR, and they were, like, it's been 2 weeks since I submitted the request and I'm still waiting to hear. Don't find yourself in that situation. Log on immediately once you hear the APR website goes live, especially if you're new, to ensure that you have the permissions that you need. Okay? So promptly identify who is your certifying official, especially if it's somebody that's new. Okay?
And
So just a
Lourdes,
few tips.
just wanted to
Go ahead.
clarify, we have a question.
Mhm.
Can we submit for a new certifying official during the shutdown? I mean, you could, but there's nobody there to approve it, correct?
That's correct. That is correct. And so that's why I'm saying that you still need to go through that because they still need to get the approvals because your APR is not completely submitted until the director and the certifying official have, given their digital signatures. So you still have to complete that process.
And
That's that
both are
piece of
needed,
it that,
right? Both.
yes, both of them. You have to have two different, and it has to be two different individuals. So it can't be the director as being the director and the certifying official. Okay. In most cases, it was somebody who submitted the grant, or it might have been the president or the VP. It was different for each of you. And those certifying officials, are individuals that again are approved by the Department of Education. Okay. So hopefully, things will move forward. We might see some timelines that are moved with that APR submission processes, but right now it really is unknown. Okay, but again, spend your time getting ready, getting the data that you need so that, at a moment's notice, you're able to log in, provide the details, and get that APR submitted. Okay. The fact that they have moved Town Search and EOC forward is important because we know this is a grant competition year. And typically when it's a grant competition year, the annual performance reports that are needed to determine those prior experience points will get moved forward. We saw that last time, when SSS, they moved front and we all kind of moved back in submitting our annual performance reports. So this is just in line with what might happen, right? Is they need to review the APRs. They need to determine prior experience points so that when the grant competition moves forward, that they're able to do create those slates and determine who's going to be selected for funding. Okay, so those are all, if everything works the way we're anticipating and hoping for, then that's how we'll move forward. Okay. So, but keep monitoring that trio.ed.gov. Once the government shutdown ends, then we'll hopefully start seeing some updates to the TRIO department homepage, the department's homepage for our TRIO programs. And when we can see, if any of those anticipated annual performance report submission dates have been changed or updated, modified in some kind of way. Okay. Here is a quick screenshot of what the trio.ed.gov website looks like today. You'll notice that it says that the APR web portal will be open for talent search and EOC on October 29th, and that it will close on December 4th of 2025. For individuals who were new, you'll click on the login, and what the login will automatically do is send you over to login.gov. And so if you're someone who submitted last year, you're familiar with this process, you will have created a login.gov account and set up duo authentication factors, and you can move forward with the APR submission. For those of you who were new and this is the first time, something you can do now is ensure that you have a login.gov account. And, to that effect, I haven't logged in to see if even they are impacted by the shutdown. So definitely go to login.gov, create your credentials, and then set up that dual factor authentication so that when the APR website goes live again, you've completed that process. If you have a data entry person that will help with submission of the APR, they must also have a login .gov account, as will the certifying official. So spend your time doing that, making sure that all the login.gov accounts are created. And then just monitor this trio.ed.gov to see if there's any changes in when the web portals will become available. There's a couple of questions I saw and that we'll get to as we start reviewing, some of the APR instructions. But, again, focus your time and energies right now in ensuring that you have the permissions, this login.gov account, and getting your data ready for submission.
Also, Lourdes, I wanted to jump in and people, rightfully so, wondering about certification, getting in, approvals, everything that we do for the Town Search APR, we can do offline completely and have it ready to go. The issue is, if the director is still the director listed on the Department of Ed side and they get the information once the website comes up and running, they can log on. The question becomes, if they don't have the certifying official approved yet, they may not be able to submit it, but you can start working on it online. I mean, not working on it, I'm sorry. You can start plugging in the information, but right now, if there's no live website, that doesn't mean that you aren't already working like crazy to get your APR done with whatever systems you have. Okay. Because usually it's a printout that you have that has all your numbers ready to go. So you can jump on, like Lourdes is going to tell you, and plug in the numbers when you need to plug them in. And then the only other thing you have to attach is a spreadsheet that has the seniors' names that are going to college as of fall 2025. So anyway, I just wanted to step in and not and I guess stress to folks that yes, this is a big hurdle. You won't be able to submit without some of this information coming up. And someone said, well, what if the government shutdown doesn't happen before the APR due date? I said, well, you've got your APR done and waiting. And the minute that it opens up, you'll be ready to submit it, right? Can't control what we can't control, right? So we're not going to get in trouble if the government shutdown is down and we weren't able to turn it in. But don't expect another month to get it together once it comes up.
Yeah. And keep in mind again, the contractor, they may not be, affected by the government shutdown. They've already contracted with the Department of Education to host this portal. And so they may decide, there's still a government shutdown. We're going to go ahead and move forward with capturing this information, knowing that there are no changes to the APR for talent search and or EOC. So it's really going to be dependent on keeping track of that website and logging in, and seeing if we're able to say, okay, they really did go live. You may not get communication from the Department of Ed, to say, hey, here's your list of seniors that you're tracking, and or the APR web portal is live now. I said alive, is live, right? But the contractor may decide to go ahead and move forward with it because after all, they've been contracted and there may be no changes. So, we'll just do our due diligence again with continuing monitoring, working, and getting everything ready, as Lisa also indicated. And thank you, Celine. I see that you did log in to login.gov and that you were able to successfully log in. So that's a great indicator that, that login shouldn't be a problem for us. The other thing is that, we just kind of have to just go with it and, see what, we hear is happening with this APR submission process. Okay.
Lourdes, could you make your screen a little bit bigger, the zoom in?
Sure. I'll go ahead and focus in a little
So
bit more.
much. And somebody has their, if you have your hand up, let me know in the
Mhm.
chat if you'd like to ask me a
Mhm.
question.
Mhm.
Lower your hand. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit more. Okay. When you do log in and when you finally get your permissions and you log into to the APR web portal, you'll find probably about 6 or maybe 7 tabs. And the tabs will allow you to respond to the 4 sections of the annual performance report. And we'll go over those 4 sections here in just a bit. There will also be a tab that allows you to download the Excel file of those seniors that you're tracking for degree attainment. You'll also have an opportunity to review your objectives, the objectives that you're going to be measured against for earning these prior experience points. There will also be an opportunity for you to preview, your annual performance report and do the APR submission process. So those are going to be the various tabs that you'll be able to see with these annual performance report submission. Okay, but let's go ahead and take a look at the 4 different sections. The first section is project identification, certification, and warning. That first tab for section 1 is really just pre-populated with who are you? Who's submitting this annual performance report? And you've already gone through the process when you went into the login to identify, who the project is. So a lot of this is pre-populated. What will not be pre-populated is the name of the data entry person, because that person can change. Within the web portal itself, there will be a couple of links at the top on the right-hand side, and one of them is a little link where you can say, give permission to a data entry person. And you can click on that and you can fill out the name, the contact information for your data entry person. That gets sent off to the contractor to say, I want to give this individual permission. The person will receive an email message once that permission has been granted, so that they can now log in and assist with completing this annual performance report. They will also be notified, the data entry person, along with the director and the certifying official, where you're at in the process with this APR submission process. So you get email messages and stay on top of what's happening. So that will be something that is, really the only part that you fill in on this form on the APR website, in this portal. What is important is that section 1 also responds to the certification and warning regarding the information that is submitted in the annual performance report. The certification and warning are in the conclusion of the APR submission process. The director and the certifying official certifying that, to the best of their knowledge, that the information that is being provided in this annual performance report is accurate and complete to the best of their knowledge. It's also an acknowledgement that, that if there's any false statement or misrepresentation, that's intentional, that this is, subject to penalties, fines, imprisonment, or both. And so we're just acknowledging that we're taking the time and providing the best information available to us regarding the students that were served, the outcomes and objectives, and the earning of prior experience points. We no longer have to submit any document for this certification or warning. That, again, is all provided in the digital signature at the conclusion of the submission of our annual performance report. Okay, so really this particular page and in the instructions really is just identifying that we're submitting this APR and addressing, these certification and warning, and acknowledging both of those. Section 2 of the annual performance report allows us now to begin telling the narrative, the outcomes, and regarding those students that have been served within the 24-25 reporting period. We know that a couple of things regarding the regulations for our talent search programs is that when we wrote our grants, we identified two different things. We identified target schools, that we would be serving students within particular target schools. We identified, these are the target schools we're going to be working with. But we also identified that we would be working within a particular target area. And so oftentimes with talent search programs, we might serve students that are or individuals that are not within our target schools. And so as we begin thinking about this section 2 and the participants that we're working with, we want to keep both those things in mind, because the regulations say that a talent search program can serve students who are individuals up to the age of 27 if they are eligible. It also acknowledges that talent search programs can serve veterans. So when we look at this particular demographic profile, we see that it's asking us, did you work with any veterans? Did you work with any adults who are over, the compulsory age of what a high school age student might be? So we see those within this particular form. So I wanted to acknowledge that before we begin looking at this demographic profile. Okay. So again, we're using this form to tell the narrative and that story about whether we served the number that we were funded to serve, and whether we are also in compliance with respect to serving 2/3 of our students, of our individuals who are both first generation and low income. As you can see from this section 2, the first part of it, the participants funded to serve will be pre-populated with the number that you were funded to serve for your grant. You'll notice under A1, now they're asking a question about the number of participants that were new and continuing. New students, of course, are individuals who were new, served for the first time in 24-25. The continuing participants would include any students that were served in the prior reporting period and or even prior reporting periods, meaning they might be a returning student. A3 will be the total number of participants that were served in the 24-25 reporting period. And A3 is going to be used to determine whether you met the number funded to serve. And if you did meet the number you were funded to serve, then you will earn 3 prior experience points. The next few sections really allow us again to describe a little bit more information regarding our students. And in section 2, part B, we're describing now our compliance, that 2/3 criteria. You'll notice that we have different options to allow us to describe the number of students in B1 that were both first generation low income. In B2, those who were low income only. In B3, the number who were first generation only. And in B4, those who were other, meaning they were neither first generation nor low income, nor were they both. The number of students in B5 should total the number of students that we served in A3. The department again uses B1 as what they begin thinking about, this idea about denominators and numerators, but B1 is the numerator to the total number of students that were served. And so the department will use this to determine whether you were in compliance and met that 2/3 requirement of students being both first generation and low income. Okay. I think something that's very important is that before you submit an APR, you are not in compliance, you may want to rethink about that, because you never want to submit an annual performance report and say you are not in compliance, because the Department of Education could come back and say, well, you know what? You are not in compliance. So now owe us money back because you didn't serve the number that you were required to serve with being and being in compliance. Remember, those are all things that we have agreed upon when we received our grant award notification to serve the number we were funded to serve, and and most importantly, to serve students who are eligible and are both first generation low income. Okay, so that's just a tip to look very carefully at your numbers, before you even submit your APR. Things that we're reporting on regarding the profile of our students is with respect to race and ethnicity. Again, these are all going to total the number of students that were served. When you get out to the web portal and you begin filling out these numbers, there's a lot of quality control. So if your numbers are off, you will immediately need to fix that, because everything has to total the number of participants that were served. In Part D, you'll notice that we're providing some information regarding gender. We don't, again, believe there will be any changes because they were pretty straightforward with respect to gender. That is one of the areas that other annual performance reports are having to change because they had maybe male, female, or they had other, or binary, and allowing for students to self-identify their gender. But we didn't see that in this Talent Search APR, so that's why we're also anticipating that there won't be a change here. We'll identify again how many are male or female. In Section E, we'll identify the age distribution. And we might have smaller numbers in that 19 to 27 range, but we also know that it included that up to age 27 because of the regulations that say a talent search program can serve individuals up to the age of 27. And then that's also where in option number 4, 28 and over, because if we were serving, for example, any veterans, then those might be included in that E4. Unknown, we can, put a number there if we weren't able to substantiate or didn't have a correct date of birth for a student. Again, we must account for everybody and must total A3. Here you'll see section F, if you served any veterans. In G, if you had any students that you were serving that were of limited English proficiency. And then in H, if you had any students that your talent search program was serving that were in dual enrollment programs. Now, dual enrollment programs, it's important to understand the definition about what they're looking at for dual enrollment. And here we're looking at students who, where, for example, your target schools may have had an agreement with the local, community college or institution for your institution about dual enrollment. And most specifically, if those students were going to be enrolled in, a dual enrollment program that maybe was going to allow them to earn a credential, whether it was a certificate or an associate's degrees. So read carefully what your agreement was, and particularly your schools, and what type of agreements did your schools have, with them regarding dual enrollment, because that's specifically what they're asking for. In section I, participants enrolled in rigorous courses that are not offered at the schools. This area is something that is very confusing for talent search. And I think it's because I think folks start at and only read half of this, and participants enrolled in rigorous courses. And so they want to respond and say, well, all my students are taking rigorous courses. But that's not the question that's being asked here. The question that's being asked is that how many students were enrolled in rigorous courses outside of your target school. And if those students had to be enrolled in a rigorous course work outside of your target school, and if there was an associated cost, how was that cost addressed? Did you have to use talent search grant funds to pay for it? Did the school districts provide funding for that? Was there no charge for those costs because of an agreement that you already had with those partner institutions? Or did those individuals have to pay for that rigorous coursework using a third-party waiver? Okay, so remember, this is not asking about who completed a rigorous coursework. Rather, it's asking the question about if they did have to, who paid for it if there was an associated cost. In J, here we're referring to students who may have been served by another federally funded program. So if you had a student, and so we're talking about a student that was in Town Search that was also at the same time participating in another federally funded program. So how many of those students, for example, participated in both Talent Search and Upward Bound at the same time, or in Talent Search and Upward Bound Math Science at the same time, in Talent Search and Veterans Upward Bound at the same time, in Talent Search and Gear Up at the same time? Okay, so that's what they're asking you that question. Not that did they participate in Talent Search, but then left Talent Search to participate in Upward Bound. That's not what they're asking for. How many at the same time participated in one of these other programs? What is important for you to remember is what's defined within the regulations regarding students who are participating in more than one federally funded program, meaning that if they were in your Talent Search program, it's also important for you to know that you have to document the services from Upward Bound if they participated in your Talent Search program and in Upward Bound at the same time. You are responsible for knowing what services they received from the other program. And so remember that that's something that you have to retain in your documentation. In K, this question is with regards to responding to the Government Performance Results Act. This report is a report that Department of Education puts together and responds to particular criteria that the department and or other stakeholders might be asking about talent search. And they want to know about most specifically your seniors. And we know that FAFSA is a major component for them enrolling in post-secondary ed. So they're wanting to know how many of those students that were seniors and or equivalent to a senior were completing FAFSAs and enrolling in post-secondary education. You'll notice that P4 is asking you most specifically for whoever you reported on in section 3 and you included in A5 plus A8, how many of those completed the FAFSA and did not enroll in post-secondary ed? And how many completed FAFSA and enrolled in post-secondary ed? And out of those individuals, how many did we not know or we couldn't confirm that they completed the FAFSA? Because we have to account for every one of those students if we indicated that they were a 12th grader or equivalent to a 12th grader as, identified as, somebody who might be in a 5th-year program of a 5-year standard number of years. And we'll look at that a little bit carefully here in this next section. In section L, here you can see that we're responding to those competitive preference priorities. There is no narrative to say these are the particular activities that we engaged in. They just want to know the numbers. How many of those students participated in the CPP1 activities, which was increasing knowledge, and CPP2s were the STEM activities. In part 3, they were asking about the CPP1 and CPP2, and then how many of those students didn't engage in any of those competitive preference priorities. And again, we're referring to the competitive preference priorities that were in place for this grant cycle. And so we'll respond accordingly, giving numbers. This has to total all of our students that were served in the 24-25 reporting period. And again, we're simply providing numbers, no narrative. The CPPs don't earn us any prior experience points. They just want to know you wrote to these in the last grant competition, and so how many students participated in these activities. The next section, M, is really asking us the question about the number of students that were, either served through the target area and or the target schools. So you'll notice the first question here is, what is the number of participants that were served that didn't attend a target school? So thinking about those individuals from the target community, and you will add in that number. When you're out at the APR web portal, you'll also have a form that will be pre-populated with the schools that were reported on in 23-24. And so you'll need to select the option for each of the schools and then choose to edit the information. So most of the National Center for Education Statistics school identifiers and those school names will be pre-populated. You'll just need to edit and identify how many students were served at that school. You'll need to indicate if it's a high school, for example, did they have a dual enrollment program? Yes, no, or it's unknown. And if you indicate yes, they did have a dual enrollment program, then you'll need to identify how many students from that particular school were enrolled in a dual enrollment program. This particular form will have some totals at the bottom of the form to show these are the number of students that were served from all of the schools and the total of number of students that were in dual enrollment programs. This number, the number of participants in dual enrollment programs, that particular total must total the number that you have identified here in number H, okay? If it doesn't, you will get an error and you're going to have to go back and fix and edit your numbers in those school tables. You'll notice also that as you're filling out the information for the schools, if you have, for example, a high school or a middle school that does not have dual enrollment students, then you need to use the option value 9999 values to indicate that there were no dual enrollment or they did not have a dual enrollment program. So there's some quality control also when you're filling out this particular form template for the schools online. But what is important to know is that there will be totals, and that if you have the dual enrollment total here, it must match what you have in section 2, part 8. Okay. The next section that allows us to report on this APR is section 3. And in section 3, here's where we're reporting the educational status of all the students that we have served within the reporting period. You'll notice that the first several, A1, 2, 3, 4, A6, A7, are all groups and identifiers for those students who were considered non-seniors. You'll also notice that A5 is 12th graders only. In A8, these are students that are considered fifth year high school students. So they're considered equivalent to a high school seniors. And so these a few groups of students are students that are more indicative of students' grade levels for students who are in high school. But the other options, A9, 10, and 11, allow us to respond to those grade levels for individuals who might, for example, have been served from the target area versus a target high school. What is important about the information that is provided in this section A is that the tool begins to use, the web portal tool begins to identify students and who might be classified as a particular denominator. And then in section 4, when we begin describing the outcomes of these students at these grade levels, we begin to identify some numerators. So the web portal will then identify, okay, here's your non-seniors, for example. Those students who are in A1, A2, A3, A4, A7, and say, okay, these are the students that we're interested in to form a denominator. And we're interested in finding out, did they progress to the next grade level or did they graduate? to help determine the outcome for our very first objective. And then they'll also look at that A5, those who are equivalent to a seniors, to say, okay, this is now the group that we're interested in to determine the denominator for graduation, for completion of a rigorous program of study, for enrollment in post-secondary education, and be able to determine a numerator to address those outcomes. So you'll notice again that there are other groups that got served, get counted in the numbers, but they are not included in any outcomes objectives. So those, most specifically, those individuals in A9, 10s, or 11s in this particular section. Okay. So I think one thing that is also important to know is that as we begin, kind of dissecting this information and looking at these objectives, is that we earn prior experience points based on the particular objective. So you'll notice that our very first objective, if we meet the outcomes, we'll earn 3 prior experience points. In the APR web portal, our objective will be pre-populated, and then we'll use the information from section 3 and now with the information that we provide in section 4 to determine that outcome. So let's go ahead and take a look at that first objective. The first objective is the percent of non-senior participants that are served in 24-25 and whether they complete the academic year and progress to the next grade level. For those individuals that I referenced earlier, the individuals that were 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and or individuals that are considered the 4th year out of a 5-year, they're looking at these particular students and saying, how many of those students have now moved to the next grade level or graduated? And so if we think about this particular form, we can see that anybody that and the number that we include in A1 is going to form the numerator for our objective. So those number of students that we counted as being non-seniors in A1, A2, A3, A4, and A7 are going to be counted as favorably towards meeting this particular objective. You'll also notice that as we look at this particular objective and the options that we have, that first one is saying they progressed or graduated. A2 is saying they persisted, but they're still in school, but they didn't progress to the next grade level. So we include them in A2. A3 says they dropped out of high school. A4 indicates they were deceased. A5 is their other. And then A6, is unknown. I tend to include my unknowns as those students who might have moved away. I don't have any indication because they moved away. The school couldn't tell me whether they progressed to the next grade level. In other words, in an audit, I don't have anything to support that they progress, so I might put them in an unknown, knowing that it's going to impact me negatively because I'm not indicating that they progressed or graduated. So what is also important to know is that when they determine the denominator for this objective, that A4, any students who were deceased will get removed from the denominator so as to not impact you on the outcome of this objective. So those numbers that we input are going to be really critical to determining the outcomes of our objectives. So if you do some of your own math as you're working through and preparing your APR, look at your response to A1 divided by the number that you come up with in A7, those non-seniors, and you can assess where you're at with your objective. One thing that is also important to note about this particular objective is that it says in A1 or graduated from high school. And if you have an 11th grader, for example, that graduated early, and let's say that particular 11th grader graduates and enrolls in post-secondary ed. The fact that you've indicated that that student's beginning grade level is 11th means that you're only going to earn credit for that student graduated from high school here in this objective. That student, because you've not included them in as a senior, means that they will not be considered for graduation, nor will they be considered for post-secondary enrollment. So this really stresses the importance of, if you're aware of an 11th grader that is going to be graduating early, that you reconsider what was their grade level at the time of first service. Did you have a transcript, for example, that showed that they, on that date, you first provided services within the 24-25 reporting period? What was their true classification, an 11th grader or a 12th grader? If it's an 11th grader, so be it. You're only going to be able to get credit for them having persisted and graduated, even though they may have enrolled in college, because you're keeping that individual in the grouping of an 11th grader. Okay, so I think it's really important for you to understand that. Again, if you meet this objective, you will earn 3 prior experience points. One thing that I really do like about the instructions for the APR for town search is that you see like, oh, these are who we're counting as numerator and denominator. So when the final instructions come out, read those carefully. Okay. The next 2 objectives that we're responding to is graduation. And there's some very important things to consider about graduation and who we're identifying as graduating students. And the part of it that's important is this definition about with a regular secondary school diploma within the standard number of years. Within our regulations and within the policy that often comes within our instructions for the APR is that the department has defined who are the students that we're looking at. And also something that we addressed when we wrote our grant is that we talked about students graduating with a regular secondary school diploma within the standard number of years. When we looked at section 3, we saw that this idea and this concept about students who might, at some of our schools, take 4 years to graduate. You know, the high school was 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So we're anticipating that that was 4 years for regular seniors. So those were the group that we identified in A5. However, we also saw that more and more of our target high schools are having students graduate in 5 years because many of the students are now anticipating earning a certificate or an associate's degree by the time they graduate from high school. And so for those students, the standard number of years is 5 for them to graduate. So whether your school is a 4 or a 5 year, that's why we're calculating the seniors as grouping A5 or the ACE A8 value. So this is very important when we begin thinking about who are we evaluating for the next 2 objectives. You'll notice that the objective reads the percent of seniors. So we're looking at those A5s and those A8s. If we meet the first objective, we will earn 3 prior experience points with respect to the number of students in our denominator graduating with a regular secondary school diploma within the standard number of years. So in a little bit, we'll look at this table below that says, well, who is that? Where am I putting that detail into this particular table? The second objective is with regards to rigorous program of study. We are also looking at that group of students, those who completed a regular secondary school diploma within the standard number of years. So that's our denominator. And we're looking at how many of those individuals completed a rigorous program of study. When we think about this particular objective, you know, we're using the same information. However, when we consider the table below, we have a couple of options that will allow us to break this down regarding the number of students who completed a a regular secondary school diploma within the standard number of years and whether they completed a rigorous program of study or not. So let's go ahead and take a look at that table. When you look at the options, okay, you'll notice that we have quite a few, B1 all the way to B8. And then we have B9 that totals, the records. But you'll also notice that they're really, again, only asking about those individuals that you have grouped into A5 and A8. But we have a couple of different options here. You'll notice that B1, B2, and B3 are wanting you to report on the number of individuals who received a regular secondary school diploma. But you'll notice that there are some differences. B1 and B2 are saying they completed it within the standard number of years. But now you'll also notice that in B1 and B2, in B1, they're saying how many of those students that completed within the standard number of years this regular secondary school diploma. And the first option is they did not complete a rigorous program of study. In B2, they completed a rigorous program of study. And so the answer B1 will allow us to respond to the objectives. B3 allows us to respond to how many of those students, and let's say I had 150 of those students, and how many of those students received a regular secondary school diploma, but not within the standard number of years. I can still go ahead and report that they earned a regular diploma, but they will not be considered for this graduation or rigorous objective. Okay, but I am still able to report on them. B4 will allow me to respond to whether those individuals in A5 and A8 received an alternative credential. Maybe they earned a certificate of attendance, or maybe they earned GED, or a high school equivalency credential. So here I can report on those. In a little bit, we'll talk about why is that different? How is this being considered with respect to college enrollment and who I'm going to track for degree attainment? So we want to be able to describe what happened to those 12th graders or those equivalent to a 12th grader because they were in that 5th year. You'll notice in B5, we're indicating that these are students who didn't graduate, nor did they receive an alternative credential. In B6, we're reporting on 12th graders who may have become deceased. And then we have other options, they didn't fall within any one of these. Or those B8s, the unknowns, we don't know. Again, they moved away. Something happened. We weren't able to confirm that they graduated because because they moved, and neither the school district or the school was able to tell us if they graduated. In B9, again, we're totaling all of those individuals, A5 and A8. Again, there's quality control in the numbers. If we make an error when we're entering the data, we'll see, and we'll be forced to fix that. So we can't move forward with the APR submission until all of these numbers are accounted for. You'll also notice that in B10, they're asking you about, those anybody that might have, that was from the target area that, got completed, a high school equivalence credential or a GED, and you can report those. However, you're not earning any prior experience points. You're strictly earning prior experience points based on those individuals that were considered regular secondary school diploma and within the standard number of years. Okay, so here we have broken down, what happened to those individuals, those seniors. If we meet our first objectives, they're looking at the denominator is the number A5 and plus A8. The first part of it, they're to sum the B1 and the B2 to determine the numerator. And the sum of B1 plus B2 as the numerator divided by the number of total students that graduated with a regular secondary diploma within the standard number of years, then that will be used to determine whether you met the first objective, and you will earn 3 prior experience points. In determining the second objective, they're going to look at B2 divided by the total number of of students who graduated within the standard number of years. And if you earn, if you meet that particular objective, you'll earn 1.5 prior experience points. Okay. So your answers here, no narrative again. They're strictly using your numbers that you post into this form to determine whether you met objectives. Okay. Let's go ahead and look next at the next objective, which is post-secondary education enrollment. Currently, the description within this form tells you that the percent of participants, and again, it will be pre-populated, who have graduated with a regular secondary school diploma will enroll in college. I think the piece of it that is missing from here in the way that this objective is being evaluated is that condition about within the standard number of years. So they're looking at those students, the ones that you put in B1 and B2, how many of those students enrolled in college to determine how many prior experience you'll earn in meeting this particular objective. If you meet it, you will earn 3 prior experience points. When we consider this table below, it is a little bit confusing, especially if this is the first time that you are submitting this APR. For most folks, you have, a database structure that's already populating this for you. But, we really want to understand what the databases are capturing for us. And so this particular table really uses your responses to that B section that we just filled out. If you think about, let's say, for example, that in B1, I indicated I had 15 students that graduated that within the standard number of years and who did not complete a rigorous program of study. Then in this column B, they want to know how many of those students enrolled in college in post-secondary ed by the fall term or through deferred enrollment in the spring of 2026. And then how many did not enroll? So if I had out of those 15, 10 of them enrolled or deferred, then I would put a 10 in B1 in this column here. The other 5 would go down into no evidence, or they did not enroll through deferred enrollment. And then in column C, we would do the same thing. How many graduated, how many from column B2 enrolled in college or deferred enrollment, and how many did not enroll, or we didn't have evidence that they enrolled. And then in column D, it would sum the column B and C to determine this is the total number of students who graduated the rigorous, with a secondary school diploma in the standard number of years, and that becomes the numerator for the sum of B1 and B2. What's important about that is that you will earn your prior experience points, even though you might have provided some information about other students who may have graduated. And you'll notice that this particular form does allow us to respond to those others who graduated with, not in the standard number of years and happen to enroll in college. Okay. Something that I do want to point out with respect to this deferred enrollment is that the student has deferred enrollment not because the student has decided it. It is deferred enrollment because the institution said you cannot enroll until the spring of 2026. I know oftentimes we have talent search students who have said, you know what, I want to work in the fall because I need to save up money for college and I'm intending to enroll in the spring. That is not considered a deferment that you can report college enrollment for. Nor if students, I know sometimes we have some of our students who say, I'm doing this personal thing related to my church, and so I'm going to go to do their thing in the fall and I'm going to enroll in the spring. That is also not considered deferred enrollment. It's a deferred enrollment only if the institution has said, we have made that determination that you cannot enroll here until the spring of 26. And you need to ensure that you have documentation that indicates that. Okay. So You'll notice again with this particular table now, if we look at column E, they're asking about those students who might have graduated with a regular diploma, but not within the standard number of years. And so here you would provide how many of those enrolled in college and how many did not. In column C4, they're also asking you for those individuals who might have earned an equivalency credential. How many of those enrolled in college and how many did not? Same thing with column G. They're asking about anybody that you reported in B5 and B7. How many of those enrolled in college and how many did not? In column H, they're asking for you to sum E, F, and G for a total number in column I of individuals that enrolled in post-secondary ed. Okay. The next section of the APR is asking for you to summarize, where did they enroll at by type of institution. And so you'll break it down, how many enrolled in 2-year private or public, 4-year public or private, a vocational school and a proprietary school, or unknown institution. And this should total the number that you have indicated above that actually enrolled in post-secondary ed. Now, why are they asking us these particular questions? They're asking us these particular questions because when we submitted the APR in 21-22, the question is not so much with who were you going to earn prior experience points for post-secondary enrollment, but rather they were asking the question about who are you going to track. And so in the 21 annual performance report, they asked us 2 important questions. The first question was with respect to who are you going to track? And so the first question was, I'm going to track anybody who earned a regular secondary school diploma, whether they completed a rigorous program of study, whether they didn't complete a rigorous program of study, but instead, did they earn a regular secondary school diploma? And if we think about that section B, B1, B2, and B3 had a condition that said they earned a regular secondary school diploma. So if we chose this very first option, then those are the individuals that we included in an Excel spreadsheet that we uploaded to the Department of Education and said, these are the individuals that I will track for degree attainment. Option B allowed us to go even further to say, okay, not only am I going to track those individuals that received a regular secondary school diploma, but I'm also going to track individuals who may have earned a GED or an equivalency or a credential. And so it would have been a greater number of individuals. And so depending on the choice that we made, we would have again included those individuals in this Excel spreadsheet. And this is the Excel spreadsheet that we've recommended for you to log in and download so that you're aware of who you need to track to say, did they earn either a certificate, an associate's, or a bachelor's degree? Okay, so those are 2 options that we had for this very first question. The second question that we were asked was with respect to how we would track those individuals. And so these decisions were already made for you. So you kind of have to abide by them in this APR report. But you do have to, track who you said you were going to and follow the process that you said you would do to track these individuals. Okay, so let's look at that second important question that we had to respond to. And that was with respect to who was I going to track and what process. The first one choice and option that we had was that I'm just going to track all of those individuals, whether it was the regular school or option 2, everybody that I said enrolled in college. And so I'm just going to track everybody. So I would submit an Excel spreadsheet, and in this Excel spreadsheet, I would include the student's name, their first name, their last name. I would indicate that they were from my program, that they were for the batch year, For this year, it'll be batch year 2025 for these seniors. And then I had to indicate, if I chose option 1, NA, I'm going to track every one of these. However, the second option that I had is that I was going to look at all of those students and I would choose a randomizer. And I would upload this Excel spreadsheet with all these students' name, and the randomizer would come back and say, okay, here's the students that you're going to track. And in my Excel file, in that case, I would upload the students with their names, and I would indicate the randomizer said, yes, check this student. No, don't check that student. And that Excel file would be uploaded because I said I was going to use a random sample to determine who from that a random sample actually attained a degree. So those were the two options that I chose, that I had to choose from. And I have to follow that in this APR. So now moving forward with respect to those selection processes, now in this annual performance report, I have this 2018-19 Excel file, which is the cohort 2018, that I'm having to respond to and say, okay, how many of those students now by August 31st have actually attained earning a certificate, an associate, a bachelor's, both an associate's and a bachelor's, or earning more than one credential. An example of E5 might include, somebody who earned a certificate and a bachelor's. And then indicating the number of individuals who did not earn a credential, identifying any individuals from that cohort that I'm tracking that may have become deceased, and then knowing that any individuals who may have become deceased are going to be removed from the denominator, and then arriving at a percentage of individuals from this cohort who have now earned either a certificate, associates, a bachelor's, or a combination of more than one of these credentials. Okay, and then if I met this particular objective, I would earn 1.5 prior experience points. Now, this particular objective, it's also important to note that we have folks who might be joining us that you were first funded in this grant cycle, so you may not have had a cohort that you're tracking, and that it won't be until the next funding cycle that you have a cohort. You'll still be required to submit who are the 12th graders from this year that, that enrolled in college, and you still have to submit that cohort, but it won't be until the next cohort that you now have a group of individuals that will be tracked. And so you'll have to respond accordingly based on this criteria here, and that is the way it's presented, to how many individuals earned a certificate or not. Okay. So those are all of the forms that we will have to fill out in that APR. Section 1, we click on Section 1 tab at the top, we fill that out. We click on Section 2, we fill out the demographic. We click on Section 3, we fill out and provide the information on the educational attainment, on the educational levels. We click on Section 4, we respond to all of the outcomes and what happened to those individuals. We can click on the option to download our Excel file for this cohort. There should be another tab that says, click on this to upload the list of your seniors who've enrolled in college. There should be another tab that allows us to review our standardized objectives, meaning those percentages, what's pre-populated on this form. And then the last tab is the review and submit, where the review and submission says, okay, you've completed all of these. Did we find any errors? If you click on that particular report and it finds anything that's check marked in red with a red X, that means you have to go back and fix that section because the numbers may not be totaling, and or if there's any possible errors that you have to fix. If everything has a green check mark, then you can download and preview what your objectives might look like and your prior experience points. And if you're all good with that, then you can say submit the APR. And when you do choose the option to submit the APR, then you will be in the APR submission and certification process, and you will get something similar to this form, where you again will be able to preview your PDF, which you should download and save because that's your prior experience points included. And you want to keep and store that document because the program specialist does not keep um, that report for you. And it's really your only opportunity to have that, to prove that you've earned some prior experience if you ever had to. You'll also be able to download some data, which will be the list of seniors that you've identified that you reported on, that you're going to be able to track 6 years from now. Okay. You'll notice that this is also where the director will click on this little check mark and say, I certify to the best of my knowledge that the information is complete, kind of like when we looked at, section 1. It's also where the director will indicate I approve on the APR submission. Once the director submits, certifies and approves, a message will be sent to the certifying official to indicate that the director has submitted and that they must now log in. And whether they have 5 days or whether they have 2 days, that they have to log in through login.gov, through that trio.ed.gov web portal, and do their dual authentication, and they will arrive at the same place where they must now certify and approve. In the meantime, the data entry person is getting notification as well, as is the director, to say that the report has been submitted. All of those processes, again, need to be completed before the APR submission date and that closing period. Right now, again, the trio.ed.gov is saying that's December the 4th. Okay, but we're going to continue to monitor that in the event, they decide, because of any, required permissions that might be impacted because of delays to the APR. And if the contractor decides to postpone these submissions, then we're going to continue to monitor that. But in the meantime, again, we're going to spend the majority of our time and effort, capturing all of the information and getting as ready as we can for this APR submission. Okay. So I think there was one particular question that I wanted to address that I didn't, that was in the chat. And it was with respect to the numbers. When I submit my number funded to serve, the department uses the numbers to determine whether you have made substantial progress. And in order to earn any prior experience points, you have to serve at least 90% of the number that you were funded to serve. You may not earn 3 points for meeting the number funded to serve, but if you serve at least 90% of your numbers, then you do have the opportunity to earn prior experience points for the other objectives. You just don't have the opportunity to earn those 3 points for meeting the numbers. If you don't serve at least 90% of your number funded to serve, then you will earn 0 prior experience points. Okay. Again, it's important now to understand where you're at with, even before you submit the APR. The APR submission, again, is really just a confirmation of what you already know. Am I going to earn prior experience points? Did I meet my numbers? Am I in compliance? Okay. So those are some tips that I have. This APR submission and certification really completes that process. And again, you want to be timely with submitting it before the APR portal closes. Okay. Really important for you to download that PDF, download that data, and to store it, on a network server, where, future questions that you might have about the APR, that you have that information as is needed. Okay. Lisa, is there anything that you'd like to add and or questions that, we need to make sure that we address?
There's something that came through the chat just now, and I think it was on the previous page that you were on, the one about the last objective. If you could scroll up,
Mhm,
because I was trying to answer and I was like, yeah,
mhm,
let's answer together.
mhm, mhm,
Would the more than one credential,
mhm,
the
mhm,
E5,
mhm. Yeah, I
mean, mean a
sometimes try to
bachelor's?
include, yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
the rest of the question was, does that mean a bachelor's and a master's?
Yeah, if you want to. Yeah, I've included, that's where I've included my folks, more than one credential. I've also included, somebody I mentioned earlier, a bachelor's and a certificate. I might include that there because they've uh, sometimes we have some of our students who are thinking more about, I've earned my bachelor's, but in order to be competitive in the workforce, credentialing has become very important. And so this is where I might include those individuals as well.
Great. I
Mm-hmm.
was thinking that as well because it had
Mm-hmm.
the E4s, both associate's degree and bachelor's degree.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could put that more than
Mm-hmm.
one credential. And someone asked in the for the fifth objective of post-secondary enrollment. So do all post-secondary programs count for this section? Trade school, certificate programs, when you're counting for enrollment? Yep,
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
they do.
So and, it's going to be really important for folks. I mean, we didn't go over it here, but you have the instructions that, are really helpful. And they're really talking about any post-secondary education after earning high school, right? After earning that GED, after earning a regular secondary school diploma. Um,
I'm
so,
glad you brought that up, Lourdes,
mhm,
because and the school, I mean, someone said the school has to be certified, correct? It doesn't say
mhm,
anything like
no,
that in the
mhm,
regulations that I posted.
mhm,
And so
yeah,
you mentioned the instructions, which I would really like, most of great questions, Lourdes, but you know what I
mhm,
did? I had the question, the instructions document, and I
mhm,
copy and pasted. And a couple of
mhm.
times I had to go to the talent search regulations,
Oh,
where
yes,
we're
yeah.
asking about, oh, wait a minute. So a student doesn't
Mhm,
have to go to the target school if I
mhm,
want
yeah,
to serve them? And I said,
yep,
no. And someone said, I
mhm,
thought they had to be at the target school. I
mhm,
said, no,
yeah,
here's the regulation. And now
mhm,
you can have a policy that,
mhm,
what my policy is, they have to go to the target school. I'm
yeah,
not going to mess around with chasing them around town or
mhm,
sending staff all over the place, because
mhm,
the target school definition is that it's the focus of your
of the
delivery of
service.
services. And
Yeah,
so you never want to take away from that focus.
yeah,
If you could share the instructions, Lourdes, on your side
yeah.
screens.
Yeah, can I also address one other question? I don't think I've fully answered that question about the numbers.
Mhm.
Um, so oftentimes, the question is like, how many can I overserve? There's so much need in my target area, and I love that folks want to help a lot of folks, especially if you're over your numbers. But also, folks, you need to keep in mind that over serving sends different messages to the department. Okay. It sends a message that I can do more with less, but it also sends a message that are the students that per participant cost is really at, if I'm serving too many individuals, that per participant cost is going down, meaning am I watering down all the services that I wrote about are so critical in my grant that students need? And so you definitely want to think about that. Yes, we do go over our numbers sometimes, and but I always tell folks I don't ever like to go greater than 5% because I really don't want to send those messages. Um, I think also some folks think that as students leave or they graduate early, that I have to remain a constant number of 500 students. And no, that's not true. You at a current constant funding of 500. So if one student graduates in December, that I need to pick up somebody else in January. And no, you do not have to replace that student. Again, they're counting how many students have been served within that reporting period. And reporting on those individuals. Okay, so please, please, don't go too far over your numbers or think that I have to hold a constant 500 serving at any one time. Okay, so that was the other point that I wanted to make. The um, there was something else that I think regarding a question that you had. Um, Again, it was about college enrollment. And, because we have so many students now who are earning certificates and are earning associate's degree, we are talking about college enrollment after they have graduated from high school. Okay, so you cannot count those students as enrolling in college if they're already pursuing a certificate or an associate's before high school graduation. Okay, so this is only college enrollment after high school graduation. Okay, so that's the point that I wanted to make.
So
Um,
Lourdes, perfect question. So let me talk you through the scenario that is an actual question, okay?
mhm.
Perfect timing. Okay, based on that, what if I have a few students that they graduated in December of their senior year? They graduated in December.
Yes.
And then I'm throwing this in. They said they got certificates in May. I guess they
Mhm.
mean associate's degrees in May, but the question is, did they attend college that spring semester after graduation so that you can count it as college enrollment?
Yes.
And if they
Mhm.
got a certificate at the end
Mhm.
of that spring semester, then Lourdes, they could actually
Mhm.
count toward that last objective, but it won't be counted for another 6 years.
That's an excellent point. And yes, that's a great example, Lisa. Because those students, remember that within some of our descriptions, they're saying enrolled by the fall of 2025 or through spring enrollment. The fact that these individuals might have graduated from high school in December and enrolled immediately in the spring in college, you can count that person in graduation and you can count that person as enrolling in college. And yes, and even if they earn that certificate at the end of May, it's going to be counted on as degree attainment, but you won't get credit for it until 6 years later because it's when that cohort, that student will be on that Excel file as enrolling in college, but you won't earn any credit for their degree attainment on that certificate until 6 years. Okay.
Okay, so
A great example. Yes. Mhm.
right. And I would have never thought that could happen, but there obviously
Mhm.
there's more than a few that happens.
Mhm.
But see how you have to talk you, but
Mhm, yeah.
there was an actual ending. They
Mhm,
graduated
mhm,
in December. Then they
mhm,
kept
yeah.
going for another semester, so we can count it as enrollment
Mhm,
because it occurred after high school graduation. And then they
mhm,
got an associate's degree. And but hopefully within 6 years, you'll be able to say, oh, they got a master's. They got a combination of things, right? Hopefully it's
uh-huh,
not just that associate's degree that they received
mhm,
immediately after high school. And here
mhm,
are the directions,
mhm,
which,
uh-huh,
Lourdes, they're pretty darn
yeah,
good. I was able to almost find every single answer to people's questions off of the instruction.
yeah. Yeah, the
Uh,
instructions are really good. And again, read them carefully. A lot of the questions, most of the questions again are, included in here. And the definitions. So, they're telling you, oh, like this is who we're including. And I love that they have references to regulations, why we report on some of the things that we're required to report on. So please, read these carefully. And ensure that they're part of your policies and procedures, as you're updating information, there's that description about dual enrollment. Um, uh, you know, um, how,
but that
they're,
question pretty much there.
yep,
Yes.
yep,
So Lourdes, thank you so much. I mean,
mhm,
I can't tell you how happy I am to have you helping me unpack it and also
mhm,
everyone out there. I hope this
mhm,
was helpful. Let us know. Our time is up. We will have the recording ready on YouTube probably later this evening. It'll
mhm,
post the link on our blog page, and also you'll get if you registered, you will get a follow-up email that has that link in there for y'all to look at. I want to stress again, these documents that Lourdes is looking at, she edited
mhm,
them off of the official 20 3/24 APR, but they are not. That's why she has it in red, and it should say draft on it. They are the draft 24/25.
Mhm.
I doubt, Lourdes, are going to make any changes.
No,
So
I doubt
act
it.
like it's
Mhm.
due December. What do they say? The website says December 4th.
By December 4th. Yeah.
So act like it's going to happen. And if we're still waiting for something to open up, I'd rather be waiting on them than panic and say, oh, you've got, 3 days to turn this in. Right. So
Yeah.
get her
Yeah.
done, like you say.
Yeah. And especially if you've had any changes in your certifying official, you do that right away because you don't want to be held up from getting the APR in because of that. So,
Thank you all so
but
much. Thank you,
yeah,
Lourdes.
thank
Thank you,
you,
Donna and Leah.
Lisa,
And
Donna, Leah. Thank you so much. The opportunity to work with you in this effort.
thanks, Lourdes. We'll talk to you
Mhm.
later. Thanks, everyone who's got a hard
Uh-huh.
stop to leave us.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, enjoy the rest of your day.